Hey everyone, welcome back. Today I am going to do a very highly requested video all about Eliotte's birth story and what the heck happened, because lots of you guys want to know. So I wanted to have her home before doing this. I don't know why, but I did. I don't know why this makes me nervous to talk about, but it does. So as a lot of you guys probably know, depending on if you're watching this in real time or years in the future, real quick recap. My water broke at 24 weeks when I was on vacation across the country. I was hospitalized for a month and then I went into labor. So best case scenario is that I would have been hospitalized till 34 weeks, and that's the latest that they would have let me stay pregnant for a variety of reasons. They believe that at 34 weeks with that condition, if you make it that long, which is pretty unlikely, the baby is going to be way healthier outside of your body than inside of your body, because that is when the risk of them not being developed versus the risk of getting an infection from being open so long kind of meet in this perfect time zone. But I found out later that only 1 in 8 people with their water breaking early will make it a month like I did. So I felt pretty lucky about that. Anyways, so basically, here's what happened. Short answer, went into spontaneous labor. As a lot of you guys know, I was really worried that I would make it to 34 weeks and then have to be induced and that she wasn't going to be ready to come. In hindsight, I don't know that I should have even worried about that, and clearly the doctors didn't think that was going to happen, because every time I brought it up to them, they wouldn't even answer my questions about it being, because it was so far away, and in their minds they knew that it was probably not going to happen. But anyways, so we actually need to back up a few days before I went into labor. So I went into labor on a Saturday, April 15th. The Tuesday before that, we actually had a near C-section scare. So one of the things that happened when I was in the hospitals, I would get fetal monitoring, which is basically a non-stress test twice a day. So once every shift. And at my morning one, they did not like her heart rate. So if you guys have been in labor, you've probably heard them talk about the baby's decels, which is the heart rate decelerations. And they only like those to happen a certain amount of time. And they like to see increases in the heart rate a certain amount of times in X period of time. And decels are kind of okay if they coordinate with a contraction, but they didn't like what they were seeing with her decels and her lack of XLs. And so that was the day that I was supposed to have an ultrasound anyway. So I went in for a biophysical profile ultrasound. By went in, I mean I literally was wheeled down the hallway. And the doctor on call that day on my perinatologist group was an older gentleman. He's half retired, very old school, and was not about to answer a single question. He very much had the attitude of, I know way better than you. You don't need to know anything. What I say goes kind of a thing, which royally pissed me off. I was so angry, and I'm like, well, are we having a C-section? This feels extreme. What is happening? Couldn't get any answers all day long. And then I had my second round of monitoring later in the day, and basically the same thing happened. And except for that, now at this point, my nurse, who I really trusted, who had said well, yeah, he can be kind of overboard sometimes, was no, this is a real thing, this is happening. Luckily, he was no longer on call because he's part-time now, and so he doesn't do overnight call. And so a doctor who I really liked had come on call, and she came in early to see it, and the minute she walked in the door, I knew, oh shit, this is bad, because she's just this cute little tiny bubbly Asian woman, and she came in and her face was just horrified. So I was like, okay, this is real. I'm kind of scared now. So I was like, okay, Tim, call Allie. Allie's our doula. So she was saying basically if this continues for another hour, we are at a literal emergency C-section where you are put out, kind of a thing, and this is a real emergency. And I'm like, okay, but she's only 28 weeks, on the dot, do we really want to take her out? She's like, absolutely not. We don't really want to take her out. So I'm like, well, can we have a little more time? So during this time, like the code button is pressed, nurses are running in, they're like shoving oxygen on my face, putting IVs in my arm, and I'm like scared. My doula comes and like, she's like asking really good questions for us that she probably already knows the answer to, but just for our benefit in like a great way. She's like the best personality. I really want to interview her for my podcast because you guys, oh, she's amazing. Anyways, so she ended up making me feel like a lot better about it. And it's just like, well, if this has to happen, like this has to happen. Everybody seems to be in agreement that this is no longer being an exaggerated thing. Like this could be really bad. So basically what I said is, can I have half an hour? And she's like, okay, you can have half an hour, but no longer. And luckily in that 30 minutes, Elliott decided to cooperate. We had a very stern talk with her and said, girlfriend, you cannot come out until it's safe for you to come out. So luckily she listened, she behaved, she calmed her heart rate down. And we did not have to deliver her that night, obviously. But what did have to happen is I had to be on continuous monitoring for the entire night. So if you've ever been in labor, like I said, it's the straps with the heart rate and the contraction monitor. And that's basically literally all night and indefinitely until they say it's fine to come off. So that resulted in the worst night of sleep ever. Had some more magnesium drip. I think I talked about the magnesium drip in probably my water broke video, but it's miserable. And then debated if we should do the second series of steroid shots. So we found out at the time that you can only do 2 sets of steroid shots, and they're most effective if you deliver within 2 weeks of doing them. So I was like, well, do we know for a fact I'm delivering within 2 weeks? Because I don't want to waste the second set if she's gonna make it another 6 weeks. So decided not to do them yet. Had we known we'd be delivering 4 days later, that would have been great timing, because then we only got in 1 of the 2 sets of the second series. But anyways, she's clearly fine. Her lungs are amazing. So whatever we did helped tremendously. So moving on from that continuous monitoring night, it was like that destroyed my body. Like I was in so much pain from that night on. Horrible back pain, horrible like cervical pain. Every time that they'd strap that monitor on me, it felt like it just they'd do it so tight because she was so small and so low that it just felt like my cervix was like, I don't even know how to describe it. Like, well, clearly what was happening is that it was dilating, but it was so painful every time. So my aunt and my cousin came out to visit me that Friday from Wisconsin. And that day I remember I was talking to Allie, my doula, and she was like, so, you know, when you go into labor, your cervix moves from like this position to this position. And I swear I literally felt it do that. And I went, crap. But there were so many girls on my floor who basically my whole hospital floor was in a hospital just for women in labor and babies and like various women's health surgeries. So my whole floor was just women who they were trying to keep from going into labor early. So we had 2 different groups we could go to during the week. We had a support group and a craft group. And so I got to know a lot of those women at those groups, and I knew that tons of them were there in preterm labor. Tons of them were there for short cervix or literally like had no cervix lining left. And I'm like, okay, well, this is like not ideal, but like, I'm sure it's gonna be fine. And they weren't gonna check my cervix until it was absolutely necessary because of the fact that there was no water to protect from infection anymore. So they were just like, okay, well, you're not showing, you're not having more than 6 contractions an hour. That's kind of their magic number. And I never felt a single contraction until that point. The monitor would just show like 2 or 3 occasionally. Saturday rolls around and I wake up just feeling kind of gross, like weirdly tired, like, and kind of nauseous. And I'm like, this is strange, but still had a ton of like cervix pain, like just like pressure and like pain. And it really hurt to like sit down. And then that's when I started feeling like a real contraction. And I wasn't having more of them than I had been having according to the monitor, but I actually was feeling them and feeling pain during them. And I remember talking to my nurse who I had the day before when I had my second of 2 mental breakdowns while I was hospitalized. So really great that she was the one there that day. So she obviously knew like my stance on natural stuff and how I really hated having all this stuff pushed on me. And so I'm really glad that she was the one there that day. And I remember saying to her, I think I've changed my mind on the epidural. Like, I've only had a few of these and they're real painful. And she was like, yeah, I did the same thing too. So during the day, they kept just being like 2 or 3 an hour, totally fine. I took a nap, which never happened. And sometime in the afternoon, I think my husband came back around 1:30 and brought me an acai bowl. And then my aunt and my cousin came back, I want to say around 3. The timeline is very sketchy to me. But sometime between that span of time, I remember being like, okay, I feel gross. I just took a nap and I'm having more contractions. Like, this feels like a thing. But still wasn't worried about it because, like I said, I knew girls on my floor who had 19 contractions an hour and never went into real labor because they were on this drug called nifedipine, which stops labor. So my contractions are getting more and more painful and more frequent, but they're not being, at this point, I'm like literally just strapped up to the monitor continuously because I'm telling my nurse I can feel these contractions. And she's like, okay, well, we'll just leave the monitor on for a little bit. The only time I actually was okay with the monitor being on. But the contractions were not being picked up on the monitor because she was so tiny and so low. So where her heart rate was being picked up was the exact place that my uterus was contracting. And like both monitors can't be on the same point. So I was just like clicking the thing. And I remember being like, well, just click the thing every time you feel a contraction. I remember my aunt and my cousin came back and we were like, I think we were trying to play a game. I was so out of it. I remember being like, just looking at them and pretending that I had any idea what was going on in the world and like pretend, I'm like, okay, I can like fake that I'm in this conversation, and the whole time just like clicking. And I think around 5:30, all of a sudden I knew I was gonna throw up, and I told them they needed to leave because ain't nobody want to see that. And when that happened, I knew that I was in labor. So the whole hour before that, we had done nifedipine, and I was sure it was going to work because, like I said, there was a girl on my floor with 19 contractions an hour and on nifedipine, no problem. The nifedipine basically just made it so that I could open my eyes. Like, that's how little it decreased the contraction pain. And because I'd been having such severe back pain the past few days, I didn't realize that was also because I was in labor. I just thought it was from the continuous monitoring, and it was probably a combination of both and bed rest and whatnot. But I never got like yes, my contractions would peak, but they never really totally stopped because I had horrific back labor the whole time. And I mean, no one can describe to you what it feels like to be in labor until it happens to you. Because the whole time that they'd ask me if I was having contractions, I'd be like, I don't know, what do they feel like? Well, you know when you're having them. They're nothing like what they tell you they feel like. It felt like my entire body was being ripped in half from the very center of the bottom of my back, like my sacrum. And just constantly, it was terrible. And so at that point, they're like, okay, well, we can hook you up to some fluids. And my nurse was like, I'm gonna call your doctor and see if he'll let us check you now because you have never been in pain like this, ever. And so she called him and he actually said like, no, not yet. And then she's like, yeah, you're not here, we need to check her. And so she's so cute. And she's like, she just had my husband, she goes, just, I'm gonna have your husband just tap the code button. We're not having an emergency. I just want more nurses here to like help out in case, you know, I don't check people 7 times, you know, I don't check people as much as someone else who's here today. So I want her to come, who's on the code team. So she hits the code button. Tim asked me if he wants if I want him to text Allie, have her come. And I'm like, oh no, there's no way I'm gonna be dilated. And I guess the nurse like looked at him and goes, yes, text her. So they came in, they rush in, they do the whole oxygen, start the IV stuff. One of them checks me and I'm already 4 centimeters dilated and totally effaced +1 station. So at that point, luckily it was like 3 of my absolute favorite nurses who were there for that, including the one who I had that day. So I felt like, okay, like this is happening. At this point, I'm crying because I'm in such horrible pain, so nauseous. Every time I have a contraction, I feel like I'm gonna pass out from trying to breathe through it. My body is like so weak from being on bed rest that I'm just like, well, this is happening, I have to go with it. And obviously this isn't an ideal timing for this to happen, but it's happening. So at that point I'm crying because I know that this is for real and the pain is so intense. And so they wheel me down, say my goodbyes on the way, get into my L&D room, and we're discussing the option of having an epidural, which, you know, I knew all the bad things about having an epidural, and I'm thinking, is this gonna stall my labor? Am I gonna have to be induced? Especially because I have nifedipine in my system. Are they gonna interact with each other and then really stall the labor? And so I'm talking through, my doula comes, and I'm talking through that with my L&D nurse and my nurse from my antepartum floor and her, and they're like, yeah, at this point, it is not gonna stall your labor. And also your baby is 2 pounds. Like, she's coming right now. And like, thank God we did do the epidural, because I have a feeling she may have come out before my doctor arrived if we did not. So we did the epidural. I was so miserable before that, and that's why I did it, because I was like, I weighed all my options. I was like, is the epidural gonna help me stop being so nauseous? And make me like, at that point I was like, I would rather have a happy, joyful experience to bring her into the world in than get everything that I wanted and have like this natural labor with no medication. And that's how I decided to do it, because they were like, yeah, you're gonna feel so much better. Like, you're not just gonna not be in pain, like you're gonna feel way better. So got the epidural, was really worried that it was like not gonna take, or like gonna, you know, paralyze me, or like all those terrifying things that they tell you about that. And the guy who came in was like, clearly just came from the beach, like was amazing. He was super great. Puked again. My poor doula got it, lucky her. And so after that kicked in, it was just kind of like this waiting game of, you know, checking the cervix every once in a while, calling the doctor, giving him an update, and when he was gonna come. And I was totally dilated, ready to push before he came. So at that point, they were like, you need to keep your legs closed, do not laugh, like do not sneeze, don't do anything. Many a preterm baby have been birthed without knowing it, kind of a thing. And I like so had wanted to go to the bathroom before I got my epidural, and they wouldn't let me, because they were like, you seriously could just drop her if you go to pee. And that's not a great experience for anybody. We do not want to be catching her while you're peeing. So got the catheter, did all that stuff. Kind of forgot that you had to get a catheter if you got an epidural. Wasn't super a fan of that, but didn't feel it, so that's fine. And then when my doctor came, he told, I'm sure, a very exaggerated story. And like, it was great that he was the one on call that night. He was our absolute favorite. He's like literally the best doctor in San Diego, like voted that way. Celebrities have seen him. He's like the most charming, caring, generous man ever, and he's like totally sincere about all of it. So he runs in and he goes, you called me and I was in the shower and I literally drove here naked with a towel around me, going 90 in my Porsche, and like making all of these jokes. And it was literally just like a party. Like, we had so much fun. We were just like cracking jokes, laughing the whole time, and between contractions, because then I couldn't feel them and I felt great. It was a little weird to have the nurses tell me when I was, and my doula helped tell me when I was going to have a contraction, and then have to push like the medical way that you see on movies and stuff. But there was no screaming. Like, I didn't scream one time. The only time I screamed was when they checked me the first time before I got the epidural, because that hurt. I think he came around 8:30, 9 o'clock, and she was born at 10:01. So I don't know how many pushes that was, but it wasn't a whole lot, and it was great. And she came out crying on her own and breathing on her own at 28 weeks, which is phenomenal and so rare. We were able to do delayed cord clamping, but my cord was about this long. So we were not able to do skin to skin. And then because they could only do the delayed cord clamping for so long, because they really needed to get her assessed by the life support team, they wanted the gravity to flow better. So she was actually held beneath me. So I like saw her for like a split second. I couldn't tell what she looked like or anything. Oh, and that's a little detail I left out of here. When you have a very preterm baby, you have a big audience for your labor, real big audience. So there were literally 15 people across from me, all just looking right there, like very calm. They're like whispering to each other as we're, you know, just hanging out, getting ready to push. And then when it was like pushing time, they were silent, just like staring dead on, waiting for Elliott to be born. It was a little unnerving. There was advanced life support. There was NICU doctors and nurses. There was the research team, because they're doing a study on cord clamping versus milking. It was insane. That was just for her. And then I had my perinatalogist, 2 nurses, my doula, and my husband. So 20 people in this room. It was nutso. So that, amongst other times, is when I was so happy to have my doula. My husband was amazing, of course, but like he didn't want to be here. Like he didn't want to see this. So he was like right here talking to me, like encouraging me, telling me awesome things. And then, so because of that, if I looked forward, straight on was my perinatalogist, behind him 15 people. My doula was right next to my perinatalogist. So my doula was who I like locked eyes with the whole time, and like just got me in the zone, ready to do this, and like totally forget that this was like a scary circumstance, and we didn't know if my kid was gonna be okay, not okay, all of that stuff. And like you just wonder at that age of gestation if they're going to look scary. Like you can't help but wonder that. And later on, my doula told me the same thing. She was like, I was really thrilled to see how good she looked. So I was honestly really scared to see what she was gonna look like when she came out. And like I said, I didn't really get to see her. So sadly, I did not get skin to skin. It's one of the things that I still am like really sad about, but I knew that most likely would not happen. I knew that she would be whisked away from me. So I fully knew that was gonna happen. And I'm so grateful that I had that month to prepare myself for that separation, and the fact that she was going to the NICU. Like she was going to the NICU no matter what, even if we made it to 34 weeks, because that's too early. They like still are working on how to swallow and breathe, eat at the same time at 34 weeks. So I think that was a luxury that we had that time to mentally prepare. So it wasn't devastating when they took her away. It was like not great at all. Like she was across the room being assessed. I could not hear anything that they were saying about her. My husband was over there with her. Couldn't hear a thing, didn't know the treatment plan, couldn't hear anything. And I was just like all I want to do is get off that table and like go listen. But at that point, I had to get an episiotomy because due to heart tones, and that was not thrilling to me. Like who gets an episiotomy for a 2-pound baby? It was pretty small. I know a lot of women tear naturally worse than that. So all in all, it was okay. And one of my NICU nurses told me like she doesn't think preterm babies should ever be delivered vaginally because of the risk of brain bleeds. And at 28 weeks, you still do have a really high risk of brain bleeds. So I also had them start the mag drip again while I was in labor, just to coat her brain and protect her brain during that. I don't know if it did anything, but she did not have a brain bleed. So I'm gonna say that was a success. And I had so much adrenaline at that point that the mag did not bother me. And it was only on, like, I was pushing for an hour, so it's not like it was on. Like I said, it might've been less than an hour. I don't know. So while she was being assessed and whisked away without me, it was then time for the stage of labor where you supposedly deliver your placenta. However, a lot of times if you give birth preterm, especially in the 2nd trimester, early 3rd trimester, this does not happen well. So I really wish, I should ask my doula if she remembers how long he let me try to do this on my own. But I remember him massaging it and it was not happening. I kind of don't think he gave it enough time. But like I said, I don't know. And then he tugged on the cord, which you know from like every natural delivery course that you like aren't not supposed to do. And I was shocked when he did it. I was so mad. And the cord just snapped off, not connected to the placenta at all. So I looked at him and I go, so how are we getting my placenta? And he goes, oh, I'm gonna have to get it. And I'm like, what? So he manually goes in and starts trying to get it out. It does not come out. There's maybe like 2 or 3 bigger pieces. And then they get is it the curette? I forget that's what it's called. Long metal stick with a little like hook thing on the end. My nurse and my doula both go, you're gonna wanna pop up that epidural a little bit. They popped it up a bunch. He comes in and he's literally scraping out every inch of my uterus with this tool to get tiny, tiny, tiny pieces of placenta out. I wanna say it was like a half hour that he was doing this, maybe more, I don't know. But I could feel that through the epidural even though we bumped it up. So was really grateful that I'd opted to have an epidural. Had I known how short the actual pushing would have been, I think I physically could have toughed it out. But like I said, I wanted to have a joyful, happy experience for her to come into the world with. And so I did feel a little bit like maybe I cheated at that point. But once that metal thing was scraping out my internal organs, there's no way you could do that without an epidural. And I remember him saying, well, like he was using an ultrasound and like, well, if I go a little bit too far, I'll puncture your uterus. And if I don't get enough out, then you'll get an infection. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. But I mean, great guy. We're like joking, laughing, him, me, and my doula. My doula had actually done a delivery with him before. And so we're just like all having a great time. And I'm like trying to forget the fact that like my child and my husband are not here. I don't know what's going on with them. I don't know if she's okay, but I know that crying was a really great sign. And so I feel like really good about that she's gonna be okay. Still kind of upset that I didn't get to see her. And at that point I was just like, I can't believe that I'm stuck here on this bed and I can't go see her. And it's so funny because literally almost everything I didn't want about labor and birth and pregnancy is like what I had. I had continuous monitoring. I had IV the whole time. And you know what? Those petty things, they're not a big deal. They seemed like a big deal before I had them. And you know what? You don't even notice them if you're in labor. Like there's just too much adrenaline to care. I remember being like, I don't want that hep lock. And I had a hep lock for weeks. Like it was fine. It's not gonna ruin your labor to have either of those things. And even with continuous monitoring, if you did not have an epidural, you can still like move around a little bit and change positions and whatnot. So I ended up actually birthing on my back in the worst position to birth in, but you know what, she was 2 pounds, it was fine. It wasn't like I was pushing out this gigantic person. So she was delivered at 10. I mistakenly thought, oh yay, this means I'll get a good night's sleep. Incorrect. So then, you know, the whole like wait to see if the epidural is gonna wear off, wait to see if you like hemorrhage and die. I did have to get a little bit of site attack to, I think it was to help get the placenta out, which did not work, but also in case of hemorrhage. And then, you know, got a sandwich, and I think around 1 o'clock in the morning, they said it was okay for me to go see her in the NICU. On my way to my recovery room, so my doula left, my husband and I went to go visit her in the NICU, and that's not something I can talk about right now because it was intense. I still did not see her face. I did not see her face for 2 days, for like 48 hours. Because she just had so many things on. And yeah, that was crazy intense, terrifying. But all in all, she was doing great. So that's all that we took away from it. Got up to my room around 2 o'clock and got the whole, we got to try to make you pee thing. Oh, but one of your legs can't move at all. So that was kind of a debacle, horrible, nightmarish moment that I am so thankful only that nurse witnessed. I like made my husband leave. I was like, you can't see this. Like, you just saw all sorts of disgusting things, but this is one thing you cannot see. And then it was time to learn how to pump. So I think we finally went to bed at like 4 a.m. and slept until 7 and then went to go see her that morning. So I will definitely do a postpartum video as well. After all of that uterus scraping, I had a little bit of retained product and I needed a DNC 2 weeks ago. So that will all be in the postpartum video because I have so much to say about postpartum healthcare and postpartum in general, and oh my gosh. But all in all, like, my birth experience was not at all what I pictured it would be. It was not all of the choices that I necessarily wanted to make. It was certainly not picture perfect, but in the moment, it felt better than I ever imagined that it would feel, mentally, physically, emotionally, especially for the circumstance. And I really think that is a result of the preparation that I had, the fact that I knew that this horrible bed rest journey was finally at an end, the people that I had, my doula, my husband, the amazing perinatologist we had, the nurses, the team that we had, everyone just being really upbeat and having a great time. And then also, you know, really trusting and believing that she knew that for whatever reason, it was safer for her to be outside of the womb than inside at that point, and that she was going to be healthier out in the world than she was in there. I will never know why. That drives me nuts because I always want to know why. I'm never going to know why that happened. But I just really trusted that she was not going to come out until she was healthy enough to come out, and she knew that it was, you know, that timing was right. And so I just really trusted that everything was going to work out, and it did. I realized that I never showed you her. So she's a very sleepy lady, and she's wearing her going home outfit. So like I said, she was born at 28 weeks and 5 days, and she was in the NICU until, oh, are you okay? 35 weeks and 5 days. 2 different NICUs across the country. If you guys haven't seen that video, I will link it down below. We got footage of her private medical jet in there. And then, so 7 weeks total, and she is now 37 weeks and 6 days. So she'll be technically a full-term baby tomorrow. And yes, she is definitely pooping right now.
I love you, you beautiful stink pot.
Yes. And anyways, so yeah, I think that's everything about my birth. I know this video was super long. Please let me know what questions you have down below about any of this stuff for upcoming videos that you want me to answer, etc. So thank you guys so much for watching. Thanks for hanging in there with me the past 3 months of insanity, and thanks for all of your prayers, well wishes, etc. And definitely leave me a comment below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe if you are not already subscribed. See you next time.